I'm Safi Russell from SDR Consulting Inc., and we're here today on Business Basics Friday. The goal of this session is to provide some value to small business owners in the space of tax, accounting, and general business, and then have an open Q&A at the end.
Happy Friday, everyone. Hope all is well with you. Happy Friday once again. Safi Russell here. We're going to get started. About 30 seconds. If you're joining here live on Facebook, go ahead and share in the comments where you're joining from. I'm here in New York, and it is 47 degrees today, so still a pretty mild winter so far. Once again, if you're here live on Facebook, go ahead and share in the comments where you're joining in from. Also, if you're here on Clubhouse, you can feel free to throw that in the chat comment section of Clubhouse. So welcome again to Business Basics Friday. I'm Safi Russell, founder and CEO of SDR Consulting Inc. Business Basics Friday is a weekly session catered to providing valuable information to business owners. We have a variety of guest speakers that come in to help share information and educate you in the many areas of your business that you may need to manage. And just as a disclosure, this is strictly for education and information purposes only. No client relationship or specific advice is being given, and we're not liable for use of information provided today. As far as my background, I've been in the industry 20 years. I'm a CPA and enrolled agent, and also have a master's in taxation. And SDR Consulting Inc. is a virtual firm based in New York, but we do service clients all over. And we mostly work with business owners, especially those in the mental health profession, to help reduce your concerns regarding tax and accounting so you can focus on yourself, your own well-being, and the well-being of your clients. And so for today's session, we have a great topic. We're going to have questions at the end and a special offer at the end as well. So definitely stay tuned to the end if you can, or catch this on the replay. And the topic today is going to be from burnout to balance. And so I want to welcome our guest speaker, Dr. Sola. Dr. Sola, the floor is all yours.
Thank you so much. And thank you all for being here. My topic is from burnout to balance. So I'm going to start off by sharing my screen, and then we'll start the presentation. So whenever I start a presentation, I always like to get the opportunity to introduce myself so you know who I am as a speaker. So my name is Dr. Sola Togun-Butler. I am the founder and CEO at Butterfly Counseling Services. So Butterfly Counseling Services is a mental health agency that I started in 2019 to make mental health services accessible and affordable to a diverse client population, and to challenge the stigma associated with receiving mental health services. That was very important to me because oftentimes when people feel like they need mental health, they might be reluctant to seek services because of that stigma. So I wanted mental health to be on the forefront. So people should feel comfortable, seeing their therapist, just like they're comfortable seeing their doctor. So kind of working to challenge that stigma and making mental health services affordable. So to further expand my desire to help others, I established transformative coaching and consulting, and I focus a lot on stress management, preventing burnout, emotional wellness, and cognitive wellness as well. I am a licensed clinical social worker, and I am also a certified professional life coach. In addition to that, I used to be a higher education professor. I was an assistant professor in human services as well as social work. So I was educating the next generation of mental health professionals, which was very important to me. And I left higher education June of last year to focus on entrepreneurship on a full-time basis. So I love, being an educator as well. So we'll get right into our topic for today. So the first thing I wanted to do is I wanted to define burnout. So we hear burnout a lot, but oftentimes we don't know what it means. So what is the definition of burnout? So burnout is a state of emotional, physical, and mental exhaustion as a result of prolonged exposure to stress. So that means that the individual is being exposed to stressors for long periods of time, and there is no relief. So I often tell my clients the human body is not meant to be in a high state of anxiety or stress for prolonged periods of time, because what happens is the adrenaline begins to wear down the body. So your body is getting tired. So you're feeling tired emotionally, you're feeling tired physically, and you're feeling tired mentally. So emotional exhaustion is basically not processing your emotions, not understanding your emotions, not giving yourself time to understand the emotions that you're feeling because you're tired. Physical exhaustion is fatigue. It's when you're just physically tired. It's difficult to get out of bed. People report like a lack of motivation, kind of feeling like sleepy as they're going through their day. And mentally exhausted means that your cognitive processes are not healthy. Like your thinking pattern is not a healthy pattern. So that's what that exhaustion is actually stating when we're on the verge of burnout. So when you're burning out, your performance is not at its optimum level. You just notice that you're not doing the things the way that you would like to. Like we all have ways we like to do things. Like my mom used to say, anything worth doing is worth doing well. And people who are on the verge of burnout just notice that their performance is not at the level they want it to be, but they're unable to make that correction because they are exhausted. They have difficulty coping. So, coping mechanisms are the tools that you use to cope with the day to day stressors of life. And when you are burnt out, when you are fatigued, when you are exhausted, it's almost like you do not even tap into those coping mechanisms. So those stressors are more likely to overwhelm you. So you find yourself very easily overwhelmed with, day-to-day stressors because you are already emotionally, physically, and mentally exhausted. And negative mood is just feeling miserable. So people who are burnt out or on the verge of burnout would say that they feel miserable, they feel very sad. There's a lack of self-confidence, low self-esteem, dislike of themselves. So I see a lot of negative self-talk, saying a lot of negative things about themselves and about others. So this is a definition of burnout. And I like to define burnout so people know what it is so they can be on the lookout for it. So when I know what something is, then when I'm on the verge of burnout, I can take the corrective action. I can utilize tools to make sure that I do not burn out. So signs of burnout, very, very important to understand what the signs of burnout might be. So the first one is depression, and depression is a mood disorder where there is persistent feelings of sadness or hopelessness, and you are no longer engaging in activities that you enjoy, or when you are engaging in those activities, there's no change in your mood. So people who are on the verge of burnout will report just feeling very sad, very depressed. And hopelessness is this feeling like things are not going to get better, that it is what it is. I can't change anything. So they feel very, very defeated. So also they experience anxiety, which is feelings of dread, excessive worrying. What my clients have said to me is, I'm putting all of this time into my business. Nothing is changing. I'm not having time for my family and friends. What's going to happen to those relationships? So they report, excessive worrying. There's just feeling of dread, like something bad is about to happen. And physical manifestations of anxiety could be butterflies in your stomach, your heart racing, feeling restless, sweaty palms. Because when it comes to emotions, I always ask my clients, what does it feel like in your body? What are the somatic symptoms of an emotion so that you know what it is? I'm feeling anxious right now. Fatigue, like we talked about earlier, just feeling very, very tired. I've had people describe it as almost like a zombie, just trying to struggle to get through my day. Or some people would say waking up in the morning and praying that I have cancellations, that my clients don't show up for their sessions because I just don't know how I'm going to get through this meeting or how am I going to get through this particular project at work. Loss of motivation is huge. They no longer feel motivated to do the things that they need to do because they are so tired. So the lack of motivation is evident in just getting as little done as possible. Projects are piling up. I just don't have the energy to get things done. And when we are burnt out or on the verge of burnout, we also experience feelings of loneliness and isolation. And that means that you feel that I'm the only one that's going through this. Nobody understands what I'm going through. There's feelings of shame. I feel very, very ashamed. So what happens? I start to distance myself from others because the reality is that humans are social beings, and there's a lot of power in having a support group, like people that you can turn to when you're going through a difficult time, when you're going through a crisis. But the opposite tends to happen with burnout, where people start to pull away from others. So they're isolating themselves. They're not spending time with their family, with their friends, with their partners. They're just kind of pulling away and isolating, which makes the symptoms even worse. Because if I feel like I'm the only one that is going through this, or there's no way out, the symptoms begin to get worse. So with that comes a sense of failure and self-doubt. I'm no good at anything. This is never going to change. So with some people, unfortunately, there's sometimes thoughts of self-harm. Maybe things will be better if I'm not here. So it's a sense of failure. I can't get anything done. I'm not going to be able to get things done. So we call these self-defeating thoughts instead of self-compassion, where there's a difference. Self-compassion thoughts are, yes, it's a hard time, but I can get through it. I could talk to somebody. I can tap into my support system. Whereas self-defeating thoughts, kind of, you beat yourself down. I'm no good. I'm a failure. I'm never going to get through this. This is also evident with people who are on the verge of burnout. And again, decreased satisfaction with your work, with your relationships, with life. You're just not happy. And the feeling like it's not going to get any better. And then there's also anger. And we'll talk more about emotions in this presentation. Anger is not a bad emotion. Anger is a beautiful, healthy emotion. It's just that when we are on the verge of burnout, the way that we express our anger is often not in the healthiest of ways because we're having difficulty regulating our emotions. So sometimes people who are on the verge of burnout are very frustrated, they're overwhelmed, and they might lash out at their colleagues, lash out at their family members, lash out at friends because they are so tired. So we'll look more at emotions as we go through the presentation, but anger tends to be the emotion people notice. They notice depression as well as anxiety. Now, I wanted to talk about emotional health so that we know what that is. Like, what do people mean when they say emotional health? So emotional health is an awareness of your emotions. It's the ability to express and manage your emotions in a healthy way. So just like I said earlier, emotions are not bad. So all emotions are good. And I'll explain what I mean by that. I have always called emotions storytellers. Emotions are there to tell us a story. If we see an emotion as bad, we're not going to sit with it to understand what it's trying to tell me. Now, in our society, certain emotions get a bad rap. Anger gets a bad rap, guilt gets a bad rap, jealousy gets a bad rap. Now, if we see them all as good and accept what they're trying to tell us, then we know how to pilot our emotions in a healthy way. So sometimes with my clients, when we're talking about emotional health, I turn to music. So I'm a huge music lover. I love music from all over the world. So for example, there are two artists that kind of talk about accepting our emotions. So the first one is Billie Holiday. So I love Billie Holiday, and she has a song called Good Morning Heartache, Come In, Sit Down. And she sings the song like, oh, heartache, you're here again. So that is accepting an emotion. It's like, okay, I see that you're here. Good morning, anxiety. Good morning, anger, or good afternoon, anger. You know, you're here. Come in, sit down. What Billie Holiday is saying in that song is, you're here again. So let me understand what you're trying to tell me. Another group is Simon and Garfunkel. And Garfunkel has a song where it's called Good Morning Darkness, My Old Friend. He also struggled with depression. He was very open about his struggle with depression. So I would assume that darkness is depression. And he's saying, depression, you're here, come on in, what's going on? So that is emotion acceptance. It means you don't judge your emotions. You accept your emotions because they're there to tell you a story. What is anger telling me? Anger is telling me that something that I value has been violated. And what do I want to do about it? That's what it's telling me. It's not a bad emotion. What is jealousy telling me? Jealousy is telling me that maybe I want what somebody else has. But how do I go about that in a healthy way? I had a client one time where she had shared with me in session that she was feeling a little jealous. She found out that her friend had gotten engaged. So she goes, I'm jealous. And she's like, no, I shouldn't feel that way. And I'm like, no, let's welcome in jealousy. Let's accept jealousy and let's understand what jealousy is trying to tell you. And she said, jealousy is trying to tell me that I want to be engaged as well. Absolutely, that's fine. Now, how do we process jealousy in a healthy way? Okay, I'm going to talk to my boyfriend about our relationship. We've been together 5 years, and where are we going? So that's really what jealousy was telling her, not a negative emotion. It had a story to tell. I want to get married too. I want to get engaged as well. So that is emotion acceptance. Now that we accept the emotion, understand what the emotion is telling us, the next step is piloting the emotion. And people say, what does it mean to pilot an emotion? So if we look at the word emotion, the E is next to the motion. So that means it's going to move. Emotions are going to move whether we like them or not. What tends to happen is when we don't process emotions, they come out in unhealthy ways, in the passive aggressiveness that we might have, in resentment, the things that we say to others. That's what happens when we don't pilot our emotions, when we don't regulate our emotions. So piloting emotion means that you are in the pilot seat. You get to decide where this emotion is going to go. And we are able to do that when we are not stressed and we're not burnt out. So we decide that, okay, I'm very angry. Maybe instead of hitting this person, I am going to have a dialogue with this person. Maybe instead of destroying property, I'm going to punch a punching bag, or I'm going to have a very vigorous workout. That is piloting emotions. That is regulating our emotions in a healthy way. And emotional health is tied to emotional intelligence. Now, I always forget the name of the psychologist, but he identified 9 different types of intelligence. And number one is emotional intelligence. So in our society, we think it's like academic intelligence. And it's like, no, it's emotional intelligence. It's people who are aware of their emotions. They're able to regulate their emotions. They express their emotions in a healthy way. And there's the awareness of the emotions of others. So that is emotional intelligence. So when we stay on top of our emotional health, we're able to enhance our emotional intelligence. Now, when someone is burning out, they do not have the energy. Remember, they're fatigued to do all of these things. So their emotions take over. I call that being emotionally hijacked. And if you see somebody yelling and screaming, that will be an example of emotional hijack. If I see somebody saying very resentful or microaggressive things to somebody else, that's being emotionally hijacked. So it's very, very important that we stay on top of our emotional health. And then emotional health suffers when we are stressed out or when we are burnt out or on the verge of burning out. So, what is the impact of burnout on our emotional health? Very, very important. You are not able to process your emotions. So, what happens is when you are exhausted, you're pushing things away. I don't have time to deal with this emotion. I don't have time to accept this emotion. So I am just pushing away the emotion. I am not sitting with it. I am not naming it. I'm not identifying how it feels in my body. And I am not piloting the emotion in a healthy way. Why? Because when somebody's burnt out, they're tapped out. There's no time for anything else. And emotional health, like anything else, requires our time. And because we are being pulled in multiple directions when we are burnt out, we don't have time for emotional health. So as a result, we're not regulating our emotions. We are more likely to lash out. We're more likely to allow the emotions to overwhelm us, to be emotionally hijacked, or we suppress the emotions. And just like I said earlier, emotions are going to move. If it's one thing I tell my clients, when you see the word emotion, when you hear the word emotion, just think emotion. It's going to move. So we just suppress it, but it's moving in other ways. And then what happens? It has a negative impact on your emotional intelligence. You're not aware of your emotions. So if I'm not aware of my emotions, I'm definitely not aware of the emotions of others. And that's why with burnout, it also has a negative impact on our interpersonal relationships. So when others are coming to us and expressing to us that, hey, I'm noticing that you're isolating yourself. I'm noticing that you're more angry. We do not have time to even accept what's being told to us, or we are lashing out when that information is brought to us. So it's also having a negative impact on the interpersonal relationships that are very important to us. And this is also very devastating to people who are stressed out because they're saying the reason I started my business was to have more time for my family, to have more time for myself. Or I got into this particular career path to do the exact same thing. And now I'm realizing I'm so burnt out that I don't have time to invest in those relationships and I don't have time to invest in myself. So that's the self-defeating thoughts that I mentioned earlier, where it becomes a cycle. And people just notice that they're very down on themselves overall because they set out with a particular goal and they realize that it's just not happening. So the next thing I want to do is I want to define mental health. So mental health is something that we hear about a lot, especially post-pandemic. Mental health really came to the forefront. And oftentimes people don't define what your mental health is. So mental health is your ability to cope with the daily stressors of life. We are confronted with stress on a daily basis. An example can be all of a sudden you have your day planned out and there's an interruption. Or maybe I am in session with my clients and maybe I get a pop-up like, oh, there's an emergency, I have to pivot. So we all have day-to-day stressors of life. And optimal mental health means that you're able to cope with those day-to-day stressors. And how do people cope? It's having the tools to cope. So, for example, where as a mental health professional, one thing that I do is I teach my clients these tools. And I tell my clients, take all of these tools and put them into the locker room in your brain. Because inevitably you're going to have a stressor where you're going to have to open up that locker, go in there, pull out a tool that you're going to need to use to manage that stress. So recently I had a very, very important meeting that I had to go into. So of course, what happened? Anxiety. What did anxiety feel like in my body? Heart racing, butterflies in my stomach. So I had to open up the locker room in my brain, grab my deep breathing, my 4-point breathing, and do that 4-point breathing right before the meeting. So that's mental health, having the tools to cope with the day-to-day stressors of life. And in addition to that, I kind of add my own definition to it. It's having healthy cognitive processing so that you function on your optimum level. It's the idea that you are your thoughts. So you need to be mindful of what your thoughts are. What are your thought patterns? If I'm having unhealthy negative, if I'm having unhealthy thought patterns, it's going to impact my emotion. It's going to impact my behavior. So I want to be very, very mindful of my cognitive processing, your thought patterns. So mental health basically is coping with the day-to-day stresses effectively and having healthy cognitive processing so that you are functioning at your optimum level. So you want to ask yourself, do I have the tools to deal with the day-to-day stressors? Because we all have those stressors. You know, sometimes parenting can be very stressful. If you're in school having multiple assignments that you have to do. So think about those stressors and how you cope with them. And that's what mental health is. So what is the connection between your mental health and your emotional health? So there is a connection. So think about your mental health. We talked about healthy cognitive processing. So your thoughts affect your emotions and then subsequently your behavior. And that's the connection. A situation happens, I feel a certain way about it, and then I respond. That's that powerful connection. So if my cognitive processes are healthy, emotionally I'm feeling good, and then my behavior is healthy. So we want to make sure that we keep that connection as healthy as possible. So again, there's no negative emotion. It's just how you choose to exhibit the emotion that could be unhealthy. So if I have healthy cognitive processing, I'm processing my emotions in a healthy way, and then my behavior is a healthy outcome of that because they're all interconnected. So I'll give an example. If let's say there's a situation that's anger provoking, and then I'm thinking to myself, I want to hit this person. The emotion I'm feeling is anger. Anger is perfectly fine. Now I decide to express that anger in an unhealthy way because the thought process behind the anger was an unhealthy thought process. Now the same situation happens, and I'm like, yes, I'm angry. I'm very upset, and I need to talk to this person about what they did that was anger provoking, and then I expressed it in a healthy way. Or sometimes on a global level, I think about the civil rights movement. We are angry about injustice. I get angry about injustice as a social worker. Now, what do I want to do about this anger? What's the behavior? I am involved in community organizing. I am writing to my senators. I am not spending money with corporations that violate my values. So just see the connection between the both and just know that when one is healthy, it naturally trickles down to the others. So now that I've talked about the impact of burnout on our mental and emotional health, we also want to look at the impact on our physical health because they're all interconnected. So for example, burnout and its impact on all aspects of health. What happens when we are burnt out physically? So what happens in the body? What are some of the somatic experiences that people talk about? I have headaches, I have migraines, gastrointestinal issues, high blood pressure. Those are the physical manifestations of stress and burnout. Emotionally, what is going on? Just like I mentioned earlier, I'm not processing my emotions. I'm not understanding my emotions. I'm not aware of them. So I allow myself to be emotionally hijacked. In terms of my mental health, I am not coping with the day-to-day stressors of life. Either I don't know the tools, I have the tools, but I'm just not tapping into them. My cognitive processing is unhealthy. Therefore, my emotional processing is unhealthy and my behavior is unhealthy. And it becomes that cycle. So think about all aspects of your health are very, very important because they're all interconnected. And if one is healthy, it's going to naturally trickle down to the others. But what we want to do is always check in with ourselves. How am I doing physically? How am I doing emotionally? How am I doing mentally? And also, how am I doing spiritually? Very, very important. So now, in ending the presentation, I wanted to talk about quick self-care techniques. And the reason that I say quick is because the number one barrier to self-care is that people telling me I don't have the time. I don't have 30 minutes to be in the gym. I don't have an hour for a power walk. I don't have time. I'm a very busy person. I have children. I have a business to run. I have work from 9 to 5. When I come home, I'm exhausted. I'm like, okay, here are some quick self-care techniques. And it's very, very important that you take these techniques and you put them into your toolbox. Remember the toolbox I talked about earlier, the locker, in your brain, the locker room in your brain. You want to take these tools, put them there, so that when you're faced with the day-to-day stresses of life, you can open up that locker, open up that toolbox, and pull it out. So I'm a very visual person. I use a lot of visualization with my clients. Imagine that toolbox, put them in there, open it up, take them out when you need to. So one of my favorites is soothing with the senses because your senses are already with you. So we can talk about the 5 senses. So for example, again, using myself as an example, I love music. I absolutely love music. So I love bossa nova, I love Nigerian music, I love Moroccan music. So sometimes if I feel like I'm very stressed out, I play music. Music is very soothing to me. So again, it's using my hearing to soothe myself. The other one is vision. What do you see that's very soothing to you? Sometimes I'll look at the window. I can look at the trees. I can look at the sky. I have a picture of a butterfly in my office I can look at. One of my colleagues had the picture of the ocean, and she would just maybe look at it for about 5 minutes and imagine she was at the beach, using your sight to soothe yourself. What is it that you can touch that's very soothing to you? Maybe it's cotton, or maybe it's a fabric that you like that's very soothing, or people have stones, like Amazon has these stones like people put in their hands, and the stones are very, very soothing. Or underneath my desk, I have a carpet, and just running my feet across that carpet is very, very soothing to me. What is it that you can taste that's soothing? Is it mint? I like cinnamon tea. So sometimes cinnamon is very soothing because that flavor just hits you and it just feels really, really good. What can you smell that's soothing to you? I like lavender, I like vanilla, eucalyptus, raspberry. These are soothing with your senses, using your senses to soothe yourself. And you can do this in as little as 5 minutes. So people can say, I don't have an hour, but when I say to them, do you have 5 minutes? They're like, yeah, I have 5 minutes. Maybe you have 10 minutes between a meeting. You can use soothing with the senses in 5 minutes to kind of calm yourself, get yourself into a calm body. So the next one is butterfly tapping. So you might ask, what is tapping? So tapping is based on the fact that they are meridian points in the body that allow the release of energy. And we have meridian points like right under the collarbone. So butterfly tapping is, I have my hands right here, almost like a butterfly, and I put them right under my collarbone and I tap. very gently, I'm tapping. And as I'm tapping, I can feel, even at this moment, the release of energy into my body that's very soothing because I'm hitting the meridian points right under my collarbone. And that is what acupuncture is. Those needles are tapping into the meridian points in the body. So that's what butterfly tapping is doing, is hitting those meridian points. And what some people do with butterfly tapping is they do their deep breathing, which I'll talk about next, or they say affirmations. For example, it could be, I want to be calm now. I want to be at peace now. It's going to be all right. I'm going to make it. I'm going to survive this meeting. They're saying these things as they are doing their tapping or they're doing deep breathing. Now, if this isn't comfortable, sometimes people do tapping this way. Now, again, humans in touch, almost like you're hugging yourself and then you're tapping as you're doing deep breathing or saying those positive affirmations. Again, 5-10 minutes, people report feeling a lot better. The other one is deep breathing, which could also be used with butterfly tapping. Now, we tend to breathe very shallow. So deep breathing gives you a chance to breathe very deeply. So what is deep breathing? So again, you're breathing in through the nose. And what I tell my clients is you fill your belly and then you breathe out like you're blowing out a candle. So you breathe out through your mouth, breathing through the nose and then out through the mouth. And that is very calming for the body. So if your heart's racing, you can begin to feel your heart is starting to, beat slower because you're breathing in very deeply. Just make sure your belly is full. And then you breathe out through your mouth like you're blowing out a candle. That is deep breathing techniques. Now, the one that I mentioned earlier that I used before my stressful meeting was called 4-point breathing. So 4-point breathing is I breathe in, I count 1, 2, 3, 4, breathe in, then I hold 1, 2, 3, 4, breathe out through the mouth like I'm blowing out a candle, 1, 2, 3, 4, then I hold 1, 2, 3, 4. So there's different deep breathing techniques. The 4-point breathing tends to work for me because there's a holding pattern. And I feel like when I hold my breath and I count 1, 2, 3, 4, and then I let it out, 1, 2, 3, 4, it tends to get me into a calm body. So there's different deep breathing techniques I teach my clients, but the easiest one to remember, breathe in, fill the belly, and then breathe out through your mouth like you're blowing out a candle. The next one is body movement. Now, the reason I say body movement is because sometimes, people are like, I don't have time to go to the gym. So they hear exercise and they're like, no, don't have an hour to go to the gym. It's too much. I'm like, well, just move your body. What does that mean? I can go for a walk. That's moving your body. I can do jumping jacks. That is moving your body. I can do jump rope. That's moving your body. I can stretch. One of my favorite stretches, just the wide, just kind of stretching like that feels good. That's body movement. Because neuroscientists have said that body movement gives you a nervous system reset. So in as little as 5 minutes, you can reset the whole nervous system. So just think of a movement that you like and do it. A quick walk in the backyard. I'm working from home for like 5 minutes, feels really good. Jumping jacks feels good. Jump rope if you can. Just 5 minutes to move your body in some way. Stretching is another very popular one, and people report feeling a lot better, even as little as 5 to 10 minutes. Another one that I like is called shaking the tree. So shaking the tree is literally shaking it out. You're shaking it out, like whatever it is. Maybe something was said to you that was upsetting, you're feeling a lot of stress, you kind of bring it to the forefront and you just shake it out. And we call that shaking the tree. And it's something that as mental health professionals, we do in between sessions. So a client has said something to us, it's sitting very heavy. And now we need to be present for the next client in about 10 minutes. And what we do is we just shake it out. And if you look at, for example, animals, for example, they tend to do that a lot. Like I have a puppy, and sometimes it's like, I guess, okay, let's go do something. And I will literally see him shake, almost like he's shaking away whatever he's doing at the moment. So now he can be present to run around with me in the backyard. So the person that came up with the concept said animals do that. Like they shake their body to get a reset. Why are humans not doing the same thing? So think of shaking the tree as just shaking out. You're shaking your arms, you're shaking your legs, you're getting everything out, and then you are giving yourself a quick nervous system reset. So these are quick self-care techniques that you can use, and you can fit them into your schedule because they take 5 minutes. So when I had my stressful meeting, my deep breathing was literally for 5 minutes before I went into the meeting. And it becomes a lot more manageable. And think of these self-care techniques as techniques you can put in your toolbox. So when you're met with stressors, you can just pull them out. I need to do some body movement. I need to do some deep breathing techniques because I'm really angry right now and I don't want to lash out. So let me breathe, let me get myself calm, and then approach the situation. So those are the techniques I often recommend. Um, so when it comes to, for example, stress management, self-care is something we do every day. We don't want to wait till we burnt out to all of a sudden start taking care of ourselves. So it's being proactive. So I engage in self-care every single day because I'm not going to wait till my body is on the point of breaking down to start incorporating those tools. So think of self-care techniques that you like and incorporate them into your schedule every day. And you will notice the impact on your physical health, your emotional health, and your mental health because the idea is all are interconnected. And just like, again, I go to the doctor for a physical, I stay on top of my physical health, I drink water, I exercise. It's the same thing for emotional and mental health. Let me tap into how I'm feeling. What is the reason I'm feeling this way? Let me look at my thought patterns. What's going on with me cognitively? Always just doing a check in and then using these techniques to make sure that you are feeling healthy physically, emotionally, and mentally. So that is the end of the presentation. So I will stop sharing my screen.
Wow. I felt like I was in a session. That was amazing. And I'm sitting here jotting down notes. I already got my post-it on my screen here of those techniques that you mentioned because I will be remembering them this tax season. Thank you so much, Dr. Sola, for that helpful information
Welcome.
and showing the connection between all those different, feelings, emotions,
Mhm.
physical, and burnout as a whole. That was definitely a great take on all of that. And I know for many different business owners, career,
Mhm.
people, that it will be helpful. And speaking to my fellow tax pros as we head into this tax season, I will
Yes.
be sharing this video and please share it with a friend because I know there's so many of us that experience burnout for this prolonged period of stressful time. And I want you guys to keep that in mind when you're dealing with your accountants this year and tax preparers. So, so thank you again for sharing those helpful tools. I'm not seeing any questions right now. Let me just pop into Facebook real quick. One thing I just wanted to ask you about because I've seen the term, and I think for me, now I have an idea of what it is, but somatic, I didn't know what it was previously, and I've
Mhm.
heard therapists that I've worked with mention it, and so I
Mhm.
looked into it. But if you can kind of explain maybe what that means, that I think that would be helpful for people listening in.
Absolutely. So somatic has to do with the body. And when we talk about somatic experiences, the question is, how does this feel in your body? And people have an opportunity to really kind of sit and understand, how is my body communicating to me? And that is how I explain a somatic experience. What is my body telling me? And our body has an amazing way of communicating with us if we choose to listen to what our body is saying. So as I mentioned earlier, for example, people will say like with anxiety, I feel anxiety in my chest. Or when I'm working with younger clients, I ask them, where do you feel? Where do you feel? That's somatic. I feel happiness in my heart.
Mm,
I feel anger in my head. And what is that experience? My head starts hurting. My stomach starts hurting or my heart starts racing. I feel butterflies in my stomach. So those are somatic experiences. It's clients asking, where do you feel this emotion in your body?
mm,
I feel happiness in my chest,
mhm.
because I feel like a hotness. So it's really interesting to see how people describe somatically how
Sure.
they're feeling,
Mm.
different emotions.
And the correlation between those feelings and then the physical is huge because, for a period of time, for me personally, with just ongoing stress of the industry as a whole, you mentioned digestive issues, right? And
Yeah.
just being transparent for years, it was like the doctor said everything is fine. I'm like, no,
Yeah.
something's wrong. But it
Yes.
wasn't. It wasn't. It was
Right.
the emotional, it was the stress and the body's
Mhm.
response to that, even though physically everything looked fine, it was how
Right.
my body was dealing with those emotions. Like you said, they come out in
Absolutely.
different ways. And so really kind of
Mhm.
understanding that connection and then seeing it, it was like, aha, well, this is why.
Yes, yes. And that's why sometimes doctors will refer their patients to mental health professionals because the doctors are understanding, physically we run all this tests, you're fine. So we think that you're under a lot of stress and you
Mm,
need to, speak to someone about the stress that's impacting your body physically.
wow. That's great.
Mhm.
So, and the reason that you mentioned that you feel it physically is because our body, with the adrenaline and the
Mhm.
prolonged
Yes.
stress, it that we're feeling emotionally, it,
Mhm.
it shows up physically. And so, you know, for me, it's a new year. Everyone has different things that they want to do in the new year. And so something I actually started prior to the new year was getting back into dancing, right? I do
Yes.
my Zumba class at the gym, which is great, but just jumping on TikTok and doing a dance challenge. I'm like, this feels good. I
Yes.
working at home, sitting a lot, I stand and alternate with my desk, but dancing is a passion of mine. And so I had to tap into that, as silly as it may be sometimes, but taking that 10 minutes out or 15 minutes or half an hour, whatever it is, then I can be productive the rest of the day. So,
Mhm.
finding what it is for you, like you said, it could be spiritual, it could be a walk, it could be exercise, it could be a boxing, class, but carving that time out and putting it in your schedule for you is, even though it feels like you're busy, and of course in this industry I know about being busy, but if you're not productive because you're burnt out, nothing gets done anyway. Or if you're in the hospital, nothing gets
Mhm.
done anyway. So we have to prioritize ourselves. And my goal this year is self accountability in
Mhm.
prioritizing that self
Yes.
care. So,
Yes, and that's a
yes.
great point because if we don't take care of our body, then guess what? The body shuts down.
Yep.
And then, like you said, I'm not going to do the things I need to do because I'm burnt out or I'm in the hospital. So that's why the preventive measure of making sure on a daily basis, emotionally, physically,
Mhm.
mentally, spiritually, what am I doing? Even if it's for 5 minutes every day to take care of myself.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Right.
Well, Dr. Sola, we could go on for probably another hour, but I want to thank you again. I want you to definitely share how people can connect with you. This was very helpful, and I know you have different tools that you work with and different programs you're developing.
Mhm.
So let's go ahead and share your information, and then we'll wrap up.
Sure, absolutely. If you want to get in contact with me, the best way to get in contact with me is my email. So my email is drsola@transformative.cc. I make it a point to respond to all emails. If you have any questions about the techniques or if you'd like to know more about me, you can feel free to send me an email. And my website is also www.transformative.cc, and you can get to know more about me, the different coaching programs that I have. I do have a coaching program for female entrepreneurs and female professionals around minimizing stress and preventing burnout. If you'd like to know more about that as well, you can check it out on the website, or you can always, of course, email me. And if you prefer to call me or send me a text message, my number is 516-285-2721.
Thank you for sharing that. A fellow 516er, I love it. Here in New York. Thank you for that. And I'll go ahead and just wrap up here. So once again, we were here for Business Basics Friday, every Friday, 12 o'clock Eastern. We have guest speakers come in to share content that is helpful for you as a business owner or even as a professional in your industry. I'm Safi Russell, founder and CEO of SDR Consulting, Inc., and I provide tax, accounting, and business consulting services for business owners, especially those in the mental health profession. So share this with a friend. If you're watching this on the replay, I'm sure it could be of help. And make sure to join us next Friday, 12 o'clock Eastern. Put it on your calendar and stay tuned for the announcement of the speaker and the topic for next week. So everyone have a great weekend. Do something for yourself this weekend. Go check out TikTok for my dance challenges and enjoy the rest of your day. Dr. Sola, thanks again for your time.
You're welcome. Bye bye, everyone. Take
Bye-bye.
care.